of the Rhinebeck Central School District Board of Education, and it is Tuesday, February 25th, 2014. May I have a motion to approve the minutes of the February 11th, 2014 regular meeting?
So moved.
By Mark.
Second.
Seconded by Lisa. Any additional amendments?
I had an amendment that I sent to Marianne earlier on page 2 under Communications Committee. It reads, the second to last line reads, students who have elected not to enroll in the district. It should read students who have elected to leave the district. That's it.
Any other amendments?
That's reflected in the update that you provided. Yeah.
All those in favor of the amendments as made? Oh, that's unanimous. That motion passes. We now have an opportunity for public comment. Would any members of the public like to make any comments at this time? Okay, then we'll move on to reports and discussion. And our first report is our annual independent auditors report. I'll turn this over to Tom or to Joe.
Yeah. Yes. This evening we have Dave Spirit from Tosky & Company to provide us a report of our independent auditor. It was in your board packet over the weekend. So Dave, come up to the microphone.
Have these been distributed? I would assume yes?
Yes, but I do think one person. Any?
Two boxes.
Alrighty.
That contains all the minor reports.
That's what I was wondering. Yeah, sorry about that. Does any board member need a copy of the report?
Looks like everyone.
Not everybody else?
Good evening. My name is David Spera, and I am a director of Tosky & Company, and we are the external auditors for the school district. I did not personally have the pleasure to work on your district. Tim Thomas did, but unfortunately he couldn't be here today, and I was just working up in Albany, so he asked me if I would cover for him, and it was my turn to go ahead and do something for him because he's done the same thing for me just recently. And I pulled out the exact number of cards. I don't know if I can. In the packages that you received, you should have received 4 reports. And I want to kind of just breeze through them. And I suppose the first thing I'm going to ask you is 5 minutes, 10 minutes? You tell me how much time I would like.
It took about 10 minutes.
Whatever you feel is necessary, yeah.
Okay, I mean, I don't want to just breeze through it, but...
They only got the major financial report.
They did.
They did not get the extracurricular in that, which I'll give to you at the
Let's
end of
breeze through
the
those
meeting.
relatively quickly because they are relatively minor reports.
And the audit and finance committees have met, or a portion of the finance committee have met with Mr. Tosky for a more in-depth review, but not everyone was there, and of course we have members of the public here as well.
Okay.
So that doesn't amplify your voice, but it's for the video.
Oh, okay, fine.
Yeah, so just so when we post it.
It was blocking my view.
Yeah, no, yeah.
At any rate, there are 4 reports that we issue in conjunction with the audit that we just performed. One of the smaller reports is the report on the extra classroom activity fund. It is a cash basis report. It's just basically money in, money out for all the clubs that are operated at various school levels. Bottom line, the report, again, you pay us to express opinions on your financial statements. Probably the most important thing I can tell you is that everything in these documents, cover to cover, is your financial statements. The only thing that is inside these covers that is not is our opinion. That's really what you truly engage the auditors for. The opinion on this is unmodified, which is the new buzzword. It used to be unqualified, now it's unmodified. I'm not exactly sure what's more clear about that, but somebody someplace said it is. It's on a cash basis. This is the way basically most people run their homes. This is money in, money out. And at the end of the school year, we had about $38,000. And this is money that the district holds in trust for all the different clubs. Okay? And again, there are copies of all those reports over there. There is a report to the board, and I think this I would like to actually distribute. I'll distribute it. And yes, I believe this one. The reason I'd like to have that one distributed as opposed to the one that you, the other ones, the one which you already have, is because professional standards dictate that there's a handful, about 8 or 10 different things that they like to see us convey to what's referred to as the board's governance. That would be you. And this report here happens to outline those significant items. They cover a laundry list of the areas of concern that we take a look at when we do our audits, and they are encapsulated in a very few pages. One talks about the qualitative aspects of the engagement and what's different, because, again, these are your financial statements, but while Tom is probably very familiar with them, as your financial staff, you may not necessarily be so. So there are some things that we want to make sure that you are appraised of when you look at these things. One is there are some changes. There's changes in GAAP because the people that set up the accounting rules came up with some ideas, and now those are incorporated into your financial statements, and you incorporated 2 new financial statements in the current year. It talks about some significant assumptions, and it's really kind of a hard concept for a lot of people to come away with, because everybody believes that these financial statements are exact and they're right to the dollar. These things are latent with estimates, okay? And there are 3 of them that are identified on the second page. One is the useful life of your capital assets. When you buy something, you expect it to last 5 years. If it lasts 10, it's still in service, that's great. But when you depreciate it, you're expecting that it's going to be used over a specific useful life. That's a guess. Could last less, could last longer. Compensated absences. When you award a certain number of days off to your employees based on sick, vacation, etc., and if they use them or roll them forward, that liability moves up and down. But it's just a guesstimate as to what are they entitled to, what is it worth, but we don't necessarily know that they will or won't take them. That's an estimate. And probably the biggest one in here is what's referred to as other post-employment benefits. This is a humongous number. That's not a scientific term, but it's a big number. And the reason is because it's the guesstimate as to how much has the district negotiated in the form of health care benefits to its retirees once they stop providing service to the district. And in your case, that estimate is in the realm of $42 million in the long haul. To date, as of June 30th, 2013, a little over $7 million has actually been recorded on the books. But the ultimate liability that's hanging out there that has not been recorded is in fact a total of about $40 million, a little bit more of that. Some of these disclosures are particularly sensitive. It talks about these things all over again, so I'm not going to reiterate them. It talks about corrected and uncorrected misstatements. We come out here and we assist the staff to go ahead and make sure that the financial statements in fact fairly presented. We want to make sure that we can provide you with an unmodified opinion, so we provide a little bit of assistance to make sure that we get you into that particular position. If we have to provide that assistance, we have to say that there were some corrected misstatements, and we provided some assistance with regard to it. Sometimes we do, and sometimes we don't. In this instance, there was some assistance provided. This says that to you. Disagreements with management is also covered. That's on page 3. Quite frankly, I've only been involved in one engagement where we went ahead and we said there was a disagreement with management. And it was over an accounting policy, not because we had a brawl in the cafeteria, but there was they felt that they wanted something presented one way, and because of that, we had to actually qualify our opinion, so obviously we disagreed with the presentation pretty strongly. Management's representations, we require at the end of the audit that we get a representation from management that all of the items that they provided us are the genuine article, that they were truthful to us, they were open and candid with us about all the circumstances so that we can render our opinion on this financial statement. It's important to recognize the fact that you people are exposed to the operations of your district all year long. We come out during the course of maybe a week of field work, try and get enough information for us to take a look at your financial statements and render an opinion on these things being fairly stated. So in that compressed window, we have to ask a lot of pointed questions and make sure that we get a lot of appropriate answers. So that management representation is quite critical to us. You may or may not have consulted with other independent accountants, and if you did, we would say so, and if you didn't, we would say so. And apparently you didn't because we said that you did not. I'm going to get into the large book now. This is the financial statements of the district. And as I said before, everything in here, cover to cover, is yours. You use us for a typing service to prepare it, but beyond it, everything that's contained in here, all the numbers, all the information, that's your information. These are your financial statements. And there are 3 reports in here which contain our opinions or statements relative to the fairness of the presentation. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of move rather quickly through this because I'm only going to hit the pieces that we need to discuss. And if you go to page number 1, there'll be the first page that has our logo on it, and you'll open it right there. That's what's referred to as the independent auditor's report. That's what you actually engage us to provide. This reflects the new clarity standards, which is something that the profession has dictated to us that we actually do. They dictate GASBs to you. They dictate report presentations to us. Therefore, all these paragraphs have this nice little underscored bullet highlight to it so that you know what the paragraph is going to contain. So it talks about that this is a report on financial statements and what your responsibilities are. The most important one is at the very top of the next page. It says, "Baby, that's what you want to see." And the very first sentence it says, "The financial statements are referred to above present fairly." Those are the words that you want to see. That means that everything in here is the way that it should be. If it was not, this is where you would look to see that, and you can read here, our opinion is that this is fairly presented. It talks about some other housekeeping matters. There's some corrections of an error from the previous year. It talks about the change in GAAP, which is those other matters that talk about the application of some new accounting standards. And these financial statements contain what's also referred to as required supplementary information and some other reporting that needs to be included here. Specifically, your single audit. The district receives and spends federal financial assistance. Part of the reason why you engage us is because in order to comply with your grants, you need to convey to the grantor that you spent those dollars the way that they wanted you to spend them. And we come out here, we take a look at the money you received, we take a look at the money that you spent, how you spent it, and more importantly, how you were supposed to spend it. And as long as those two line up, the opinion is presents fairly. I'm not going to take you through the financial statement because you have an accounting staff that can do that any go time. Highlights. I would like to take you to page 48. So I'd skip right over all of the financial statements themselves, basically. Page 48 is a budgetary schedule. It talks about how you did relative to your budget. Probably one of the most critical things that a board does. You adopt the budget, then you spend according to that plan. What this page tells me is that on page 48, you can see it says appropriated fund balance. That's in the second column, that's that $1.5 million number. That's the amount of money that you anticipated that you would actually spend out of your savings. The accumulated fund balance or wealth of the district that you had in hand at the beginning of the year. The very next page, page 49, says, how did you actually perform? And you can see the net change in fund balance was that it went down $108,000. So compared to what your spending plan was, you only spent $100,000 out of an anticipated $1.3 million. That's really good. One of the other things that you have to do is you have to maintain your fund balance in accordance with the state guidelines. Page 51 talks about that. You can't keep more than 4% of your fund balance, otherwise you're in violation of state law, and the taxpayers are really entitled to have that money reflected back to them according to the laws of the state of New York. And at the very bottom, you can see the actual percentage that you had in unassigned fund balance was 3.9996. So you are right there. That's not terribly important. So I'm going to take you to page 54. Again, page 54 is our three little squiggly up in the upper corner there. And this is the report on compliance in accordance with government auditing standards. This is what's referred to commonly as the GAGS report, okay? And it again says, we took a look at the internal controls that you have, were there any weaknesses, how did you do? And what this does say is that there was one item, which at the very bottom, right above number 54, it says item 213-01, that we consider to have been a deficiency. And the deficiency was the fact that the single audit for 2012 was prepared, it was available to be filed on time, but it was not filed within the 9-month rule that it has to be filed. And we'll talk about that in a second here, but because, and again, this is a compliance issue, it's also a control issue, which is why it's an internal control issue here in this report. You need to have a process in place that says we're supposed to file this report, and that you did file this report, and apparently it fell through the cracks. The predecessor auditor to us had it, didn't file it, nobody followed up on it, and it was late. It's as simple as that. More importantly, page 56. This is the last page in this report that has our logo on it. There are 3 of our reports in there, and this is the 3rd and the last one. This is the report on compliance with the major federal financial assistance programs. This is the one that if there's issues, this is the place that they would surface, and this is the one that if you have problems, this is the place that they would be identified. Any comments here that are negative would indicate that you had spent the money not the way that it was supposed to be spent as provided by your funding source. This is clean, okay? You did everything the way it was supposed to have been done, all right? And that's what all of the verbiage on this ultimately says. Notwithstanding the lateness of the report that was supposed to have been filed, you spent the money in conformance with the contracts and the agreements that you had. And that's what you were supposed to do, and that's exactly what you did. The significance of all of that boils down to, and is presented in a little outline on page 60. You're done with this presentation. If you have any questions, we're more than welcome to ask. This is the schedule of findings and question costs. This is the summary of the single audit report. You can see the type of auditor's report that's issued. It is unmodified. That's what you want to see. If it says something else, that's problematic. Under internal control of financial reporting, yeah, we had some significant deficiencies, and yes, we did have a finding of non-compliance. The non-compliance was the failure to file the report, not how you spent the money. Okay? And those are both identified as those 2 yes items. Now, below that, you can see that the reports were spent in conformance with the terms of the contract. There were no problems there. And the reason that it's important is because of number 9, had all of the reports been filed timely, that box at the bottom would be that you would qualify as a low-risk auditee. Since it wasn't filed in time, you don't qualify as a low-risk auditee because, in fact, there was a finding of non-compliance. Is it anything to lose any sleep over? No. Okay. This report will be filed. I talked to Tim this afternoon, said, I'm presenting this report this evening. This needs to be filed post-haste. And he's going to make sure that the people in our department that do that for you file the electronic form, and then you will be receiving the PIN number to go ahead and actually finalize the filing with the clearinghouse. Beyond that, the final report that I'm going to bother you about is there is a management letter. It's contained there. You can read it at your leisure. It has a couple of relatively minor items that you may wish to go ahead and consider. Maybe some modifications to, and it's in here for your reading and your leisure. And you all have my business card, which has all my contact information. It's all the same contact information as Tim Thomas's. And Tim can speak to you very hands-on with that with regard to these items. I could also, they talk about accounting things like accounting for your capital assets, having somebody take a look at your tax certiorari's, and also in the final analysis talks about having some kind of a process in place to make sure your single audit's filed in a timely fashion, which I've now really beat to death. And with that, I have no more reports to present. So if there's any questions that you have, I'd be absolutely glad to go ahead and respond to them. And I suppose I should turn it over to you at this point.
Does anyone have any questions for Mr. Sparrow?
One quick question,
Sure.
just a question of process. Once that e-file is filed, how many days typically does it take to get the PIN number reported back there?
It took almost as long for you to ask that question as how fast the PIN
Perfect,
comes back
okay.
out. As soon as that form gets uploaded, it triggers the PIN. There are 2 emails that are sent out by the clearinghouse. We receive one, and one is sent over here. You have to file your PIN number, and once we see that, we attach our PIN number, and it's dead. It's filed at that point in time.
Great.
So it's a very, very, very fast process once that happens.
Thank you.
That's when the clearinghouse is up. They did shut the clearinghouse down. I'm sure you all heard about the federal website issues with regard to signing up for Obamacare. It caused such a problem that they actually went ahead and dedicated so many resources to fixing that they deferred the timeline for filing single audits. And they actually were just being filed now that were due back in September and October. But the website, once it's functioning, it functions instantaneously, but there was a gap there where they weren't accepting any files.
Any other questions for Mrs. Sparrow? Diane?
Can you just remind us again, Tim had mentioned that because of the late filing for a couple of years, there were some consequences that you had to test more when you were auditing, and would that reflect in a change in the cost of the audit while you're here, and how many years would that take?
If you qualify as a high-risk versus a low-risk auditee, what it does is it does require that the amount of programs be expanded to incorporate in excess of 50% of the total federal financial assistance that you receive. I believe that you have to have 2 or 3 years without any findings of non-compliance, and that would include untimely filing of the report. So having not filed the 2012 one on time, I know that for 13, obviously, you're in the box. I believe for 14, you're in the box. And then for 15 would be the year that you would be, first year that you could qualify as a low-risk auditee. As a practical matter, the testing, depending upon the nature of the programs that you have, it may require more programs to be audited. If you've got one large program, or 2 large programs, both of which we would have to take a look at, it really doesn't result in any additional programs having to be audited, because we are in a box and having to take a look at those programs anyhow, because we need to go ahead and look at in excess of 25%. And if one gets us to 23 and the second one gets us to 50, we're going to still have to go ahead and look at both of them and go to 50% to do the audit work and meet the compliance requirement. Cost savings, typically not. Cost incurrence, typically yes. The question is that, and quite honestly, more often than not, we wind up absorbing that. I mean, it's us, it's almost the cost of doing business. You go with the expectation that you're not going to run into a problem, and more often, once in a while, that doesn't work out that way. Is there a huge cost to it? Typically not, as long as things are reasonably in good fashion and good order once you get to the client. You can go through it pretty efficiently.
Any other questions? Well, thank you for being here. I know it was sort of, you were pinch hitting, but as I said previously, several of us met previously with Tim Toski to review all the information in the audit, and I think this kind of engagement only helps us, of course, so we appreciate the work that your firm put into it, and I think I speak for Tom in the business office as well, so we can, this is only all good for us ultimately, so thanks for being here and thanks for your report.
My pleasure. Thank you very much for having me tonight.
Have a good evening, yeah.
Okay, I am free to leave, yes?
You are. There are like cookies over there if you need something to ride home.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Dave.
All right, great. And we'll be officially accepting this report, this document later on in the meeting. All right, so we move on now to a presentation by Mr. Rick Campbell and some faculty on the extended response for science, math, and the Common Core grant. Joe?
Yeah, just by way of introduction, this is a grant that was written for funding from the Rhinebeck Science Foundation by Joan Berland more than a year ago, I believe, at this point. And the Science Foundation was interested in the grant and provided us with the generous funding to cover the expenses of the grant. And after a good deal of time and a lot of engagement with quite a few members of the faculty at Chancellor Livingston School, we're kind of at the end of that grant cycle, and after some discussions between Rick and Marvin Krebs and Brett King, the principal of our elementary school, we're at the point of making a presentation to you, the board, to kind of explain the work that's been done and maybe to give some sense as to where that work might proceed from this point forward. So, Rick and whomever, I'll turn it over to you.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Pleasure to be here. Am I supposed to talk into this?
Yeah.
Just somewhere approximate
Yeah,
to it.
somewhere where it'll pick it up and record it.
Right.
So who am I? I work at Bard College. I'm the director of the Master of Arts in Teaching program, but I was a classroom teacher for over 20 years and then went back to graduate school and had a long involvement with Bard and ended up designing a teacher education program, which I've been running for about 10 years. So anyway, just a little over about 14 or 15 months ago, I think it was, maybe October of 2000, what would that be, 12, I guess, I got a call actually from Jen Hamud from the Rhinebeck Science Foundation asking if, I don't know why they picked me, but they asked me if I was willing to come to an evening at a Roy Thai, the restaurant here in Rhinebeck, to talk to teachers from across the Rhinebeck district who'd been invited, right? It was an open invitation, free dinner, and listen to me, right? Talk about issues of writing and thinking in the Common Core, and especially how writing, which is something I spent many, many years working on in the context of the Institute for Writing and Thinking at Bard College in my own classrooms, and how writing sort of leverages reasoning and deepens the way that kids engage across all subject areas. So often we think about writing purely in the English classroom, but in fact I was a science teacher, biology and neuroscience teacher, as well as a literature teacher for many years, and my kids did a lot of writing in science, and it worked really well. So anyway, I agreed to, I'd never, spoken at a dinner before, which was odd, but I did my best between, spring rolls and coconut curry and tea at the end to actually get people to deal a little bit with the scientific problem and to deal a little bit with some writing as ways to sort of think about the problem I presented and ways to sort of share what they wrote with each other and begin to sort of take the problem apart. And it was a problem that seems simple on the surface, but most people are totally baffled by. And so it was great because I left everybody confused and refused to give them the answer, I think, right? I don't think anyone really got mad at me until after the long, first, a $5, $10 bill would have gotten the answer quickly. But anyway, so that, the dinner was good, and I guess the talk went okay because about 3 or 4 weeks later I get a call or an email from Joan Berland, who's very excited, and at that point Jen was part of the conversation as well, and Joan wants to come and visit and tell me and show me about what she's been doing in her classroom based on what we talked about over curry and spring rolls. And so I said sure. So one day after school she walks into my office with armloads of student work on big huge poster paper and just spreads it all over the room. And I began to realize this is also how Joan teaches, right? You walk into a room and there's just activity all over the place, and paper and kids working and those kinds of things. And she'd been very excited about what she understood from this idea of how writing helps kids think. And at that time they were doing some project on panda bears and science, and she just thought it was great. What more could be done? And out of that, there was a conversation about writing a proposal to the Rhinebeck Science Foundation to see, because there are lots of other teachers who are interested and enthused about the idea of doing something more with writing in science and math in the elementary school. So I helped as much as I could, and Joan submitted the proposal, and as Joe said, the rest is history. It was approved. And what that proposal covered really was the cost of the teachers getting together with me in a group to work on writing and to learn more deeply, actually, in mathematics and science. And it involved 4 full days together, a day in July and then 3 Saturdays through the school year. The last one was just about 2 months ago, as well as 2 afternoons after. And then because I was eager to get back into classrooms, I've become much more of an administrator the last few years, and you sort of lose touch with what is really important, which is the kids, right? So I also said, well, part of it should be I come into classrooms for 4 or 5 days during the fall and join you guys, to hang out, co-teach, do those kinds of things. And so that's what we did over that span of time. We spent days together trying to engage with the issue of how do we get kids to think and reason more deeply in math and science. And we very quickly moved just to mathematics because we realized this is where the standardized tests are right now in elementary school, and it's where the Common Core standards are directed, right? The Common Core standards really only cover 2 areas, literacy and mathematics. Science and history and art, music may come down the pike one of these days, but they really aren't giving much attention to the Common Core. So we said, let's focus on mathematics. And we recognized, too, that in the math curriculum and in the math tests that I'm getting over the past year or so, there's more of this Common Core idea where students should be able to not just sort of run through a series of problems and solve them by, applying a formula, but they should actually be able to think through a problem that doesn't have an obvious answer. They should be able to reason, they should be able to apply things they know and somehow work through things and be able to talk about it and communicate their mathematical understanding. Because that is a sign that someone sort of really gets what they're talking about, right? I often tell the story, some of you have heard it before, and maybe this will be my last time, but years ago I was teaching the language and thinking program at Bard College, which we spend most of our time in small rooms writing and dealing with text and thinking about things, but every once in a while we get into a lecture hall, and about 300 of us gathered in the lecture hall to listen to a mathematician from Bard talk about mathematics. And one of her she asked 2 questions when she began to talk, and the first question was, how many of you know the theory of Pythagoras, right? And it took a few seconds, but very slowly everybody's hand went up. Everybody sort of remembered a squared plus b squared equals c squared, right? Seeing heads nod. Right? And so, 300 hands went up. We all remember that from high school. That's pretty good, right? The schools must have done something right. And then she asked, the second question was, how many of you know why it's true? And everybody looked around, and I don't think there was a single hand that went up in the audience. And instead of being embarrassed, I was actually excited. I thought, I don't know, I never knew that. And of course, the rest of her talk was explaining to us this is what mathematicians do. They don't just memorize a formula so you can figure out the height of a flagpole, right, as an activity after, during school in 7th grade or 8th grade, whenever you finally learn that. But rather, mathematicians try to figure out rules and laws and things that sort of define the world, that help us take apart the world and lead to further understanding and development. It's all very exciting and wonderful. And by the time we left, we all knew at least one way of proving that that theory actually is true, and there's reasons to believe that it's true. And yet, our experience, most of us as students in mathematics, and as we go out to be teachers of mathematics, we can only teach what we've learned, but our experience generally of learning mathematics is about learning the formulas, a squared plus b squared equals c squared, but not all the reasoning that makes that true or valid. And that reasoning is what helps unlock the next problem, the next problem, the next problem, right? And so we spent our days together in classrooms with the students digging deeper into the experience of mathematics as something that's about problems and figuring out what we're thinking and what we don't know and what we need to know and how can we resolve this. So many Saturday mornings we were involved with a math problem or a math game that had implicit problems in it. And I think we had fun, but we also began to realize there's a lot of complexity here and something that on the surface looks very simple. And then we would spend the rest of the day sort of thinking about, well, how does this transport back into our classrooms? And how are the ways we're using writing to sort of unpack these problems, things we can bring back into the classroom? And that's, so that's why I went into the classroom. I wanted to sort of help to make that happen. And the reason we're here this evening is to share this with you, because I think in the 6 months basically we worked together, just kind of a pilot project, we came a fair distance. And but I think we've just begun. And I think, part of the motive here too, and as Joe said, we've had conversations, Joe and Marvin and Brett and I, and also the Rhinebeck Science Foundation, about the idea that this might be a pilot project that's worth taking a few steps further. More time for teachers to really explore and deepen their mathematical understanding and feel comfortable opening up the classroom with the kind of questions that help students say, I can be a mathematician too. It's not just about the odd number problems on page 16, but it's about something that's far more essential and exciting and interesting and deep in terms of reasoning. And so we're here this evening to talk a little bit about what we've learned, and I guess also where else we want to take this. So I think I'm going to stop there because I'm not the person that should be talking, it should be the teacher. And I want to point out, we have about 7, raise your hands, right? I think we have 7 or 8 teachers here. Yep, 7, I can still count. And there were another 5 or 6 who made every effort to be here but couldn't for various reasons. And some of these folks are now going to share some of what we did together, right? Yeah. So Jody Dooley first, 6th grade teacher. Thank you. This is very nerve-wracking for everybody, right? You're before the board of
Anyway, I just want to say how much I'm in support of this program and how much we'd like it to continue. I think Rick has helped guide us through techniques and games and language, actually, that helps children get to that deeper thinking. And that's what we all want as teachers. It's been exciting to see what the kids have done. And when we first started out, well, first of all, one of the things that resonated with me when Rick first started talking to us is that he talked about teaching kids to think about their thinking. And that really was just such a great phrase. And I took that back to the classroom and first of the year, and we talked about how we're going to think about our thinking. We're going to think about how we solve problems. And so the very first time we tried it, though, it's not as easy as you think. And this little guy, who was a brilliant mathematician, I said, well, how did you solve your problem? He said, I don't know, I just did it. And I kept urging him on, and finally, he kept saying, I just did it. Plus, he doesn't like to write very well, so that didn't help either. But he really, what it did, I just feel like it helped everybody start to really take a step back and think about how they do solve problems. And it was just eye-opening for all of us. Anyway, today I did bring some mid-year problem solving that we did in our classroom. And actually all of 2nd grade did this. This is from my class, but I felt like it really spoke to how well and how far the kids have come thinking about their thinking. These are problems, not everybody got it, but a lot of kids, the majority, could write about what their thoughts were and how they would solve this problem. And I have to tell you, for mid-year 2nd grade, it's a pretty complicated problem. I felt like it's a pizza problem, but it says you and 2 friends. That's the first way they think. Really, they have to think 3. But you can go through and see how the kids explained it. They drew pictures. They wrote about it. And at the first of the year, they weren't writing it all. I hope they're not enough. Yes, it is. Anyway, that's my support of this program. I hope you get it continue.
Thank you, Jody. Hi.
So I teach 1st grade, and one of the first things that attracted me to working as part of this workshop with Rick Campbell was the idea of getting even the youngest students in the school to start thinking about their thinking and getting ready for those next steps as young mathematicians. So what I really liked about the workshop, as soon as we met that first time, is that we were able to practice what we preach. So we sat down and we engaged in some math activities, which we're used to teaching them, but to actually engage them almost as students, it was different. And then we told Lupino right about how he got the answer to this problem. It was a good experience for us as teachers when we were able to communicate what we experienced and then talk about how we were going to translate that into the classroom. And the first time Rick came in, it was interesting. I meant the same things that Jody did in her classroom. Well, I don't know how I did that. I just moved these around. And now at this point in the year, even last week, I thought, okay, we're really seeing progress from the first time to now. Kathy Younger and I worked together in math in my classroom, and some of the students told us, well, I solved my addition problem by using the calendar. And we kind of thought, okay, you use the calendar. That's never been directly taught as a tool. They counted up on fingers, they used number lines, they used number grids, and the students were explaining, well, I didn't have my number grid, so I used the calendar. And just that little click, the fact that they're making these connections and really thinking as young mathematicians, they're problem solving. They didn't have enough fingers to count up that high. They didn't have a number grid right in front of them, but they knew the calendar would work in a similar way. That's not something I saw last year at all, these types of problem solving skills at this point in the year. So I'm really seeing success. And it's not always easy for that time for talking about and thinking about how are you solving these problems, but I'm trying to take time, at least a couple times a week to just warm them up with a couple problems on their little scratch pads, and they know they can make mistakes and it's okay, and they're going to explain how are they thinking about solving their problems. And you can see now they're excited about writing. They love taking out the scratch pads. They're excited about it. They don't care about spelling. And they can verbalize what they're thinking. It's not, well, I just know 2 + 2 is 4 because I've learned that. Now they're telling me, well, I used the calendar, or I counted up on my fingers, or I drew a picture to help me see what I'm doing. So I'm really seeing progress even in first grade, which is huge. And I really think that moving forward, this is important to take the time to not just teach what we have in our traditional everyday math program, but to take the time to expand upon it, because that's really what Common Core is looking for, building problem solvers and critical thinking skills as young as 5 and 6 years old, so they can translate that throughout their elementary, middle school, high school. They're just going to continue to build upon this. So I think that this workshop has already not only made my students better thinkers, but it's also made me more reflective, because now I'm thinking, okay, how am I teaching this? Am I teaching them to become problem solvers, and am I teaching them to think about their thinking, which is the big thing that I'm walking away from. And I see a difference in the students, and they're excited about math in a new way, so I would love to continue this work. I think it's definitely something to consider.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Robin Weber. I teach in both schools. I teach children who either have some difficulties with, I teach small classes, but a lot of my students speak another language at home, and they come here and have to do everything else in this other language, this foreign language, English. And although I don't teach math directly, I wanted to be involved in the project because it was so exciting to hear the way, when Rick presented it, he presented it in a way that I thought it could work in terms of allowing my students to be able to communicate their ideas in a clearer way. Through things like, I would play math games with my students too, because it's a way to elicit conversation and communication from them, which is what they have to do. They have to learn how to communicate. And then having them try to explain what was that card game we did? What were you trying to do with that? I know you won that game, or this person won that game, but what exactly happened? How did you do that? And it allowed them, a way to have a conversation about something very concrete. And they don't often get a chance to do that. A lot of times we have to over-intellectualize, the stuff that we're reading or writing about. But this was a direct thing. Math is a very direct, concrete thing, and yet we take them the next level, a thinking level of where they're going to go with the next idea behind it. So even though I don't use it directly as math, it's also encouraged me to think about how I present things. And we also got a chance to go into other people's classrooms and see them work on these particular projects with the other classes. And that was a way for us as a community of teachers to collaborate together, which is what we don't really have a lot of time doing. And that was a very, very big, important part of this whole project too. The fact that we could communicate and say what worked in our classroom and what didn't work in our classroom. We could see, we also got a chance to watch Rick interact with the students, and he had such a different way of doing it than what we were used to, how we would see our classes and the way the kids communicate. We want to work further because a lot of the times when we use that phrase about thinking about their thinking, the most difficult part is how do you elicit the right questions to get them to give you the kind of answers you want them to get. So we're still working on that part. you know, and I don't think we're finished with it. It's sort of like we're just beginning.
Thank you.
I'm Allison Vaccarino, and I'm the computer teacher at Chancellor. So I also don't have math or science in my curriculum, but I'm reading this statement from Donna Woodward, who is the AIS reading teacher, who could not be here. And I agreed to read this for her because I agree with her perspective on this workshop. So she says, I initially signed up for the extended response for science, math, and the Common Core based on my first impressions of Rick Campbell. Rick gave a brief presentation at one of our faculty meetings, and I was immediately excited by his approach to engaging students in their writing and thinking. I am a firm believer that all students can and should write about their thoughts and process of thinking. I was hopeful that Rick was going to help us develop this kind of thinking and writing in our students, moving beyond formulaic writing. While participating in the project, Rick helped me gain a better understanding of how I could build in this type of thinking and writing within my AIS reading groups. My students are all struggling readers and writers and will often shy away from opportunities to share their ideas aloud or in writing. We decided that the best way for me to support the extended responses would be to give my students the opportunity to experience reasoning and writing in a small group setting. The hope is that if we build their confidence with similar activities in a small group, their ability to do so will transfer over to a larger classroom setting. My students have enjoyed the reasoning and writing activities and are experiencing success. I look forward to working with Rick further and collecting evidence that my students are able to transfer the skills being reinforced in our group over to their science and math activities in the larger classroom.
Thank you.
So I guess just a moment we could take questions. But one thing I wanted to say, I mean, Jody handed out those examples of students doing work, and unless you're an educator and working in a classroom for years, you might look at it and sort of say, yeah, this is nice, and yet, as Jody pointed out, it's not so easy. Those of you who have children remember working with them when they were in first or second grade and trying to get them to write something, maybe remember the difficulties and challenges here. There's something significant about moving students to the place where they begin to write and to use language to think and to reflect on their own thinking. And believe it or not, a 5 or 6-year-old can actually be highly reflective, given the right questions, given the right amount of time, given the right kinds of problems to engage with, and given a sort of community of support within the classroom that's guided by the teacher. And once that writing begins, if it continues, it mobilizes language. And language, whether we like it or not, is how we think, right? It's really how we reason and work through problems. And that self-consciousness, that way that language turns back on itself and helps us think about our own thinking, is the very heart of what moves people more deeply into good intellectual work. And I don't care whether it's literature or history or mathematics or science. And so, you know, in some ways, what Allison read of Donna's alludes to that idea of what, you know, psychologists call transfer, the idea that there's ways of thinking and approaching problems in the world that transfer across different subjects. And the idea that beginning to think more about how this becomes part of classroom culture, a continued sort of question about how did you do this, why did you do it that way, what are you really thinking here, is something I think we'd like to build more of. And what's really interesting is we have sort of found out as we moved ahead that, you know, in the confines of time and schedules, you know, there's a curriculum to teach across the textbook, and it's a very fine textbook, Everyday Mathematics, University of Chicago, respectable, you know, little school, right? But as Kathy Younger has pointed out, who really knows a lot about the Everyday Mathematics curriculum, there's a whole set of resources there in terms of problems and games and things that can actually come home that don't look like typical homework. You can get kids working with mom or dad around fun mathematical things where you might be asked to think with your children about some of those mathematical problems. And so what we're really, I think, when we talk about moving ahead, it's, you know, I heard my name too often. It's about getting me out of the way and getting teachers really developing that community of inquiry within themselves. They're going to each other's classrooms, they're figuring out ways to work with students, they're opening up their own mathematical awareness, and they're tapping into the resources that are available in this very fine curriculum that the school owns, and I think could really be leveraging a lot more for the purposes of student learning. And I think the second agenda is how do we take this and move it across the whole school, right? How do we get at grade levels and across, vertically and horizontally, people to begin thinking and talking about this issue of thinking classrooms, we like to call them, right? Instead of just textbook classrooms headed towards tests. Those will come, but if the reasoning is there, we're actually a step beyond the tests. So anyway, do you guys want to ask any questions of the teachers? Because they said far less than they could have, I think, about what they've done.
Does anyone have a question?
Comment. Rick, thank you
Oh, you're welcome.
for igniting the spark for these guys, and thank you guys for taking the time and making the space to do it. It's important work, and you guys are slammed and you're under the gun and you're still trying to expand your practice, and I think that's really commendable. Thank you.
I guess a question I have is sort of just kind of related to what you just said, that this really is like intellectual work, right? Getting kids to sort of examine, how I think, what I think, how do I approach a problem. So helping them to look internally and then share that, and as you have all demonstrated, across multiple, using numbers, using words, using pictures. So I'm just wondering if anyone could just share, are you seeing the impact, not just in the math, but in other days and times in your classroom, those kinds of exercises, that any other ways during the classroom experience that you're seeing the impact? Yeah, anyone?
I'm Mrs. Marcia, I teach third grade. Is it okay if I stay here? Should I left?
If you could stand up, though, maybe just so I could see you. Thank you.
I'm fairly new to this project, so I recently just jumped on board, but when I was at the restaurant in the past one with Rick, and I wasn't able to attend the other ones yet, but I was inspired by what he had spoke about, and just by hearing from the other teachers in the community. As a new teacher, I'm always looking for new ways to implement my classroom better. And one of the things that I tried, and I discussed the other day with Rick, was thinking more mathematically and having them write about it. And I actually have writing notebooks. I call them thinking cap notebooks. And I give them problems, simple problems. And yes, they might be simplistic, and some of my kids get it like that, some of my kids don't, but the point of it is getting them to write a response about it. And we work on paragraph writing, we work on all that stuff, but not only are they developing their mathematical reasoning, but they're carrying it over, and their writing skills is just so much better than what I've seen at the beginning of the year. I mean, I've had students who would kick and scream and plead and run when I asked them to write 3 sentences, and now they're actually constructing a paragraph. And recently, for my social studies content, we're talking about Italy, and we've been constructing Venetian masquerade masks. So they've created them, now they're writing about it. My requirement was 1 paragraph about what your mask was, what your colors meant, what the gems that you put on it. I have kids who are struggling with writers who actually are now writing 3 paragraphs, and they're writing more deeply about it without my help. So that's the way I've seen it.
Translate,
And
right,
beyond
yeah.
that,
Great,
to me, that's huge.
great, thank you. Any other questions, Deirdre?
Or you were going to say something, weren't you?
I want-
Go ahead, then I'll say what I'm going to say.
I do see it translate over because a lot of the curriculum that we've been building across grade levels, there's a strong focus on social studies and science. And my kids, now that they're thinking more about their thoughts, for example, we're doing science right now, we're talking about matter, so instead of just saying matter is solid, liquid, or gas, my students, and the majority, different levels of spelling taken into account, they're telling me matter is all around me. They're giving me just examples like matter, a solid is something that's hard, it takes up space. They're using their observational skills to tell me more about it. Whereas last year at this point, and in the curriculum, they were saying, oh, matter is a solid, a liquid, or a gas. but this year I'm really seeing a lot more detail in their writing. They feel a lot more confident to express more in their writing, so I have to say I do see a transit throughout the day.
Great, thank you.
Are there,
Oh, I'm sorry. Did other
Are there any other people who want to say? I wanna-
No.
Well, I just want to express my appreciation and admiration for this group of faculty members coming to share with us what they've been doing with Rick Campbell and with the support of the Rhinebeck Science Foundation. And that term, Rick, that you brought up, the community of inquiry, I mean, I very much see our role also as to be guided by and really inspired by the best efforts and sort of guidance in certain ways from our teaching faculty at this school and in this school district. And it's incredibly important for us to hear from you. It really is. And I think it'll be very meaningful to us as we think about, exactly the kinds of questions you're raising and planning for the future. So it's extremely important and extremely appreciated.
Did you hear me? Okay.
I agree. It's really nice to have teachers here telling us what's really working and what they'd like to see continued. And there's some really beautiful comments in our board packages that I just want to briefly read out loud so others can hear them. Feedback from teachers talking about how this had afforded you more time to collaborate with the other teachers in your grade level, more time to collaborate with teachers across grade levels so you could have a deeper understanding of where your students were headed, to adjust your curriculum towards that, which was the initial intent of the vertical level building teams. More collaborative discussion with the special area teachers. Commented that you really have time to discuss ideas with your own grade level, let alone for deeper level conversations. And I think the best comment was, this experience made me a better teacher. What's better than that? So a question I would ask you is, if this is something we could continue, what could we do to encourage more participation in this program with other teachers? Or what could we do to remove obstacles that may be preventing people from participating?
I think we did discuss that. Part of our conversation was, how can we get the rest of the faculty sort of to buy into it, to be on board with, what we're doing. And I think a lot of it just needs to be communicated, how effective this work is. But teachers are very busy, so it is hard to get that across to a lot of them. But it's, I think it'll just take some time, for that communication to come, across, and to see, how excited, the excitement that we brought to it, that does help other people want to get involved, because that's how we got a whole group of new people getting involved when we, after we lost some people because they retired. So we had to get the group going a little bit more, because you need a certain amount of people to actually inspire each other. And also working on the different grade levels is very important, because then we get to see, exactly what you said, where the kids are at and where they're going. How can we get them there? Because we all have a part in all of it. We can't just say, well, it's because the second grade teacher didn't do it, so that's why the third grades are coming to me in the state there are. But we work together as a group trying to grow the kids.
And just having that time. It's so often we're just so busy with our day, and just having the time to relax on a Saturday and really get into deep discussions about curricula and about where we're going and what we're doing. It just made such a difference. It was inspiring to me, and you don't mind giving up that time when you feel like you're getting so much out of it.
Yeah, the time to be reflective, the time for us to think about our thinking, which we don't often have time to do in our, because we're busy.
Yeah, I gotta say, as an outsider, it's really, one was great. I feel lucky to work with this group of teachers and the level of collaborations and the way that they kept sort of pushing me. And in our conversations, we already sort of recognized there's probably 15 to 18 teachers who could very easily get involved in the next cycle, with the idea of kicking off fairly soon, investing a few solid days in the summer, but making sure there's representation from each grade level. But besides admiring the teachers, I also have to say that I really admire the administration. I wish this had been my administration back when I was a school teacher. In a meeting with Joe and also with Marvin and Brett, we sort of talked about what can happen next. And one of the things was sort of looking at the PD and the structures that are built in already for teachers, and can some of those be devoted to making some of that time? Because there's always so much in everybody's games card, right? And so I think if there was really a conscious design to sort of move forward, it would be design that would be sort of crafted by administration and teachers. I do whatever I could to help out, but in some ways I'm not needed. I think it's pretty marvelous what's the potential here. So I hope I haven't overstepped my bounds here.
Keep it coming, Rick.
Joe's used to that. Well, I certainly want to echo, what Diane Deirdre said. I mean, we're here to support you, and so whatever ideas percolate to either help teachers get more time or remove obstacles to participation or structural things that we can assist with, it really is important for us to hear directly from teachers about the exciting work you're doing, and it's particularly gratifying because, as the board has discussed many of these sort of education reform initiatives, and we did send to our Commissioner of Education and others concerns that we have about the various pieces of these reform issues, many of which detract from the great work that you're doing, and it really is so delightful to hear about all of you sticking to what is most fundamental. How do we really improve the practice? How do we help children become good thinkers and confident thinkers and writers and mathematicians? And so I'm just really proud of the work that all of you are doing. It really is just a tremendous example, and I hope we can continue to grow this kind of collaboration and, as one of you also said, a community of teachers. So we just wholeheartedly support that, and just keep letting us know what we can do. And thanks as well to the Rhinebeck Science Foundation for the support that you have given to this. And I think it's only appropriate in Rhinebeck that it's sort of germinated in a restaurant in town. With all the restaurants we have. So maybe one of those meetings needs to happen again.
I'd like to echo what Deirdre said, and also thank all the teachers for coming out to tell us about the program. I'd like to thank the Science Foundation for the funding. We talk about all the time about how we need more professional development, and how professional development costs money, of course, and it's really great to have an organization like the Science Foundation to provide the funding so that we can have a program like this.
Great. Any other questions or comments? All right, well, thanks so much for taking your time out of your evening to be here. Thanks very much. And
I'm going to slip out the door too. Thank you very much.
yeah, and please feel free to have cookies on the way out.
Take a spring roll with you, will you?
Yeah, don't do it. All right, great. Well, thank you. We will now move on to our principals' reports.
Good evening, everyone. Being the middle child, I rarely get to lead things off. But I am stepping in for Mr. King this evening, who's unable to be with us due to an injury. But he did provide me with some notes to share with you. In BLPT news, in addition to continuing the Common Language for All initiative, we are working on planning some school spirit events every 6 weeks or so. At our last meeting, we brainstormed some ideas and timelines moving forward. Stay tuned. 2 new enrichment program enrichment opportunities have begun or are about to begin. A STEM club, and the second is a mini maker club, in parentheses, engineering. 2 new offerings this round of enrichment. Info has been distributed to students, and he reports that there's already been a lot of interest. Parent portal for report cards at Chancellor opened last week. They've had minimal issues to this point. They are working on putting together a list of families who would like to continue to receive hard copies, beginning with the third quarter report card. Initial kindergarten registration window is now open and will remain open until March 1st. Mrs. Allstadt's Olympic reading contest to win lunch with Mr. King and Nick Rule, author of the Bad Kitty series of books, has concluded. 207 students participated, reading a total of 161,569 pages. First place winners are Mr. Morrissey's 5th grade class with a total of 26,075 pages.
Very good, Mr.
Congratulations. They'll be having this lunch with Mr. King and Nick Rule this Friday. Second place, Mrs. Palmetier's class with 16,327 pages, and third place goes to Mrs. O'Brien's class with 15,088 pages. CLS was the School of the Week in early February edition of the Northern Dutchess News for presenting the 17th Annual Heritage Folk Festival, where students practiced folk dances, learned about folk art in art class, and folk tales in the library. Friday, February 21st, 5th grade students presented Crossing Borders. As they've been learning multicultural music and dance, grade 5 students worked with the CLS Music Department, PE Department, and John Kirk and Trish Miller of the CLS Folk Heritage fame to perform selections from Russia, Ireland, Canada, and Native American culture for K through 4 students. A couple of upcoming events. CLS is working on setting up a STEM fair for later this year that will be open to students in grades 3, 4, and 5. Stay tuned. And the PTSO Scholastic Book Fair begins and takes place next week, March 3rd through the 7th.
Thank you.
So in the middle school, on February 10th, the building level planning team sponsored its 5th annual Top Chef competition. Entries were judged this year. We did push it back a week, unfortunately, due to weather. That did impact the number of judges that were able to attend. It also impacted slightly the number of entries that we had, as we did have modified basketball games that took place on that evening. We had 27 entries this year with 31 students participating. Entries were judged by guest chefs from Terrapin, Garden Street Cafe, Le Petit Bistro, and Rhinebeck Bagels, as well as culinary grads, parents, and faculty members. A wide variety of fantastic dishes were presented this year. I actually had an opportunity to serve as a judge for the first time in 5 years and was very excited. And plans are already underway to expand the program next year and potentially to work with the Culinary Institute to expand this and do something along these lines over the course of the full school year. So we're excited about that. I've reported out about our efforts in partnering around the study of Madagascar over the last year and a half or so. Last Monday, Henry Frischkinet met with Dr. Patricia Wright, Susan Findell of Sunshine Comes First, and members of Zara Aina, an organization founded by a group of theater artists who provide educational aid to the children of Madagascar. Joe participated in that meeting as well. It was really a brainstorming meeting, a wide variety of possibilities discussed, but the focus really was toward creating a sustainable sequence throughout the middle school, learning about Madagascar, and a real effort to raise global awareness in our students through the unique opportunities that we have partnering with Dr. Wright. We hope to begin this spring with a viewing of Dr. Wright's new IMAX movie, Islands of Lemurs, Madagascar. And that's going to be followed, we had talked about, or I guess, Henry had talked about breakout sessions. I'm not sure the time frame that we're looking at is really going to lend itself to that. So we're going to approach Dr. Wright and some of the other people that participated in this meeting and look to do a panel discussion with our students following the viewing of the movie. Our environmental and anthropology clubs have teamed up to begin a project studying the culture of VMS through our garbage. Though the idea began as a renewed recycling effort, Patty Danneman and Henry Frischkinet decided to take things one step further and take this opportunity to teach students about the process of cultural learning through examination of artifacts. From here, the project is going to take 2 tracks. I think they've had one meeting, and they're moving forward and kind of in the middle of things now. First, they're creating an iMovie of the students as they work through this anthropological process. This movie is going to be shared with our partner school in Madagascar, and I think process is in the works to have them produce something similar and share it with our students over here, so we're excited about that. Second, students have identified 7 to 8 potential issues, which they discovered through their research, and by that I mean by picking through the garbage, and have been asked to select 3 of those issues and create action plans in an effort to help to improve BMS in some positive fashion. Quiz Bowl held its first match of the school year yesterday afternoon in our auditorium. Again, participation was outstanding. We had 6 full teams, so we had 24 students participate and hope to have even more at our next meet. The practice schedules leading up to it again, weather impacted them, so I think that reduced the number of students that participated. So our next competition is Monday, March 10th from 3:30 to 5:30. I know those parents that attended yesterday really enjoyed it. The students really enjoyed themselves. So I'd encourage anybody that's able to stop by to please do so. And finally, March 14th is Health and Wellness Day. This is one of 3 that we cycle through over a triennial period of time: Artisan Action Day, Career Day. This has a health and wellness focus to it. The goal of this day is to partner with parents and community members to introduce students to new activities, to knowledge around healthier living, in the hopes that they have that knowledge and they use that new exposure to make healthier lifestyle changes in the future. We're very pleased to be able to welcome back Rufia Heyman as our keynote address speaker. 8 years ago at this point, she served as our first keynote address speaker the first time we did Health and Wellness Day, and was very well received by our students. We have 12 fitness presenters, 12 wellness presenters. This really was yeoman's work done by our parent members of our building level planning team in putting together a presenter pool. Our fitness presenters include all sorts of things, including yoga, Pilates, fencing, Zumba. Wellness presenters, nutrition, acupuncture, substance use and abuse, cardiology, bicycle, skateboard safety, dental hygiene, rock climbing, a whole variety of activities that the kids are going to be exposed to on that day, so we're excited about that.
Great.
Thank you.
Very good. Any questions for John?
Question. The Madagascar movie, are you filming it here or showing it here? It's an IMAX.
We hope to.
Really?
We hope to.
It's very exciting. You can invite the community, so I don't have to go down to New York.
There's a lot of details that have to be worked out, but
A lot of theories out there, a lot of ideas.
That's what we like. That's what we like. Big ideas. Great. Well, I'll say, I think it was last year I did go to a Quiz Bowl meet, as it were, and it's fun. I would recommend, if you want to stop in, going and seeing. So
It's very nice. We have a wide range of age groups that are participating these days, from a 3rd grader, a 4th grader, many 6th, 7th, and 8th graders, and even a high school student that's come back and joined us. So,
great.
A lot of fun.
Great. Thank you, John.
If Mr. Kemmons was the middle child, would this make me the youngest child?
it's a short thing, yeah.
I wanted to take this time to update you on some student activities. To date, 103 of our students have been recognized with a Student of the Month award. The Student of the Month was a positive behavioral and school environment program initiated by the building level planning team a number of years ago. Every month, students from each of our content areas are recommended by faculty for either improving in a specific content area, or doing a fantastic job on a project, or maintaining a really supportive average. And they're recognized over the announcements, and they're given a little award to recognize their good work. In addition, 16 of our students have been recognized with the Rhinebeck Respect Award. This award is given to students who really go above and beyond and embody one of the district missions of showing respect to others and to the environment. There's one more BLPT initiative I wanted to report on. I think I mentioned it at the beginning of the school year. In order to personalize the school environment, in addition to wishing our high school students a happy birthday when they have a birthday during the school year, the BLPT thought it would be nice to give them a little token of our remembrance, and so they get a birthday pencil. And initially we thought, other high school students, is that really going to do something for a high school student? So we weren't sure, but we tried it out. Several weeks ago, we distributed the pencils, or distributed during lunch. One of my colleagues who supervises the lunchroom came to see me and said, "Oh, we need more birthday pencils. So do you work to get some because the students really want their pencils." I was delighted. I reported to the PT, and of course we had plenty of birthday pencils in the fall. So that's it. Very well. I didn't bring an example, but it's purple and in gold letters. It says "Happy Birthday" from RHS. So those school environment initiatives are progressing nicely. Two of our senior English students recently had articles published in the Have Your Say section of the Poughkeepsie Journal. If you want to poke around in there, very well written and entertaining, informative articles. Congratulations to the Student Council and to all of our students on our third annual pep rally, which went off without a hitch. I want to recognize the work of our pep band, both at the pep rally and also at several of our basketball games. Our Hawk mascot went missing in action, and we were unable to retrieve it. Nevertheless, there was a hawk in costume at our pep rally due to the work of one of our students who created and sewed the costume the night before. So now we have, and when you know it, the following week, we got our hawk.
Is there any truth to the rumor that Paul Finch has been wearing it around Red Hook? I'd heard that, but I wasn't sure.
Confirmed or denied.
Okay. Ethan, you can print that if you like.
Our speech and debate club for the third year will be traveling to attend a speech and debate tournament at Bard College. The students are very excited about once again being involved in that contest. I'm pleased to announce that our freshman class is now sponsoring an after-school concession stand for those students who are remaining after school for athletics or for clubs. It's open for about 45 minutes or so, and it gives students an opportunity to purchase some food so that they can continue their busy day at RHS. We received notification that one of our seniors has been named as a National Merit Scholarship finalist. Just to give you an idea, about 1.5 million students take the PSAT, which will eventually qualify somebody to become a finalist. Of that number, about 15,000 students are nominated as finalists. Then those students will fill out a scholarship application, and a select number of those students will be given National Merit Scholarship to a college of their choice. And I think in my career, I could probably count on one hand and a finger the number of National Merit Scholarship finalists whom I've had the privilege of working with. So this is really a signal honor. Looking ahead, as I look at the weather forecast, I just keep repeating to myself, spring sports start on March 10th. So as I talk to the AD, we may not be practicing outside. That's the high school.
Great. Excellent. Any questions? Terrific. Thank you so much. All right. Very good. We move on now to our 2014-15 budget development update. Gentlemen?
Thank you. In terms of the draft budget to date, that has not changed. That has not changed at all since we discussed that a couple of meetings ago, and we weren't really expecting it to change much, if at all. So there are no surprises there. What we have done is a little bit more work on the list of potential programs and services that we provided to the board pretty early in our process, back in early December, I think. And you have two documents at your table along those lines. The document that's labeled 4.4.2 is a slightly tweaked version of the document you received in December. I had asked the building principals and other administrators who have a piece of this document to rank order their items. So they've rank ordered them within their own particular area. And then I had the task, which is represented by document 4.4.3, of starting to rank order those things on a district basis. If you look at the first of those two documents, the total amount of adding all of those things is $865,390, and when we put these together, they're truly are a wish list. I mean, we know that we'll be fortunate to be able to include a handful of those things in our budget on a good day. In another way, it's kind of forecasting what we see as needs that may be recurring over the future series of years. There are some things on the list, as we discussed briefly back in December, that realistically we don't anticipate we'd be able to do this coming year, even if there were an unlimited amount of money to do them, which of course there isn't. So I took a crack at prioritizing everybody's, and there are 20 some odd plus items, and essentially what I did was I got to prioritize in the top 10, and then everything else is a priority 11, because it was much too frustrating a job to actually prioritize all the way down to the 20-something item. But I think it'll give you an idea of what my thinking is at this point. To look at some of the items that are up towards the top of my rankings. There are things that we have talked about. I mean, I don't think there's anything new on this list that's going to jump out at anybody as being something they have heard little about. They've heard at least a little about. We've had some discussions in our curriculum committee about the concept of putting together a curriculum governance council, which would be a group that would incentivize faculty members to participate on a regular, ongoing basis in essentially a leadership activity regarding planning for curriculum development over the long haul. So that's at the top of my list. We're also very excited to see if there's a way that we might be able to use an opportunity at our elementary school in terms of retirement and some reorganization in that building to extend our STEM program that started in the middle school several years ago, and we've started to extend it up into the high school, and we're looking at extending it into our elementary school to support math and science instruction at that level. The thinking coincides with the development of an elementary school Project Lead the Way program, which is being pilot tested this year in a number of school districts, and we're sending a team up to I think it's Saratoga Springs is field testing it, so we're sending a team up there sometime over the next several weeks to take a look at that program and see how it's going. We were so very successful in developing our middle school program and extending our high school program thus far due to the financial and other support of the Rhinebeck Science Foundation, and you won't be surprised to know that implementing this kind of a program in the elementary school will not only require support from the general fund budget in terms of staffing, but also having, if the board decides that's something that we can support financially, we'll need to be having some discussions with our partners at the Rhinebeck Science Foundation to see if there may be an opportunity to partner with them, similar to the way we did at the middle school and to a certain extent at the high school. But that's a conversation we're going to have over the course of the next couple of months as the budget process plays out. You may, kind of on that topic, if you refer back to the first of the two documents last night, you'll see that under Dr. Davenport's list for Rhinebeck High School, he has a placeholder there to add a second year of Project Lead the Way at the high school. You'll notice that's missing from my list. That's not because I don't think it's a terrific idea, but actually his plan is to repurpose the funding for a course that's currently being taught at the high school. I don't recall exactly. Web design. A web design course that is seeing some declining numbers, and feels that we can repurpose those funds, not teach web design, at least not this coming year, and see if we can capitalize on the interest we've had thus far with Project Lead the Way and offer a second year of that. Again, see how that goes and then take it from there. So I've taken it off the wish list because Ed fully intends to, now that his scheduling process is, is further along the line than it was back in December when we put this first list together. We pulled that off the list of potential programs and services because that's the road he intends to go down, unless, of course, during the scheduling process, he only gets a handful of kids who are interested in it. But we will be able to do that without additional general fund budget support. You'll also notice in terms of some new stuff that we've started to get some input from Steve Jensen, our Director of Technology and Communication, and we have placeholders for a few items that are on my list here. He had a terrific idea that I'd love to give him credit for inventing it, but I think he'd be the first one to say that he got the idea from elsewhere. But it's essentially establishing a technology club, and we would be looking at the possibility, if there's student interest, of course, of developing a technology club at the middle school and/or the high school whereby kids would work with the advisor to actually learn how to fix all this hardware that's around our district and assist teachers in using or repairing or whatever to get them more actively involved in that part of the operation, which, as we've been adding more technology over the years, it's becoming more of a problem, because the more hardware you have, the more it breaks down, the more it needs to be fixed or plugged in or cable changed or a board changed or whatever. So this would essentially serve the purpose of developing a cadre of students who probably know an awful lot about this stuff to begin with to assist. So we put a nominal amount of money as a placeholder for that. We've also been having some conversations about the purchase of technology over the course of the next year, and there's a placeholder in there for adding some laptop carts, likely those in the middle school and the high school. Asbestos removal, which is something we've discussed, is something that I think we ought to have somewhere up the list of priorities, as with the other items that run to around 10. Then you'll see a number of remaining items numbered at 11, and they're listed alphabetically, so there's no prioritizing there. But in my opinion, unless there's something there that's resonating with the board more than with me at this point anyway, I think financially they're far enough down the list that they're probably not feasible. There are certainly many worthy things there, but in terms of actually being able to afford them, I would also say that I'd be optimistic in thinking that we'd be able to implement the first 10 items, and I think that's going to be a stretch. But I'd never say never, and there are still a few moving parts with the budget process that we'll have to see how they pan out over the next several weeks. But I want to be optimistic, but I also want to be realistic. So those are things I think we ought to give at least a second look to, and as many of those things as we may be able to work into our spending plan, I think we ought to at least over the next month plus have, especially at our March 8th budget workshop, have some discussions about those, especially with the administrators who would be responsible for implementing those, and find out a little bit more about what the thinking is. And the other thing that we did was on the earlier, actually it was on the first item, the first document, rather, 4.4.2, under facilities, that I have taken off is the item for wireless infrastructure, and essentially based on my conversations with Tom and with Steve Jensen, unless the board would like us not to, we're poised to do that wireless work next year without having to add it to the list of potential programs and services. And we have the money for that, and with Director of Technology on board, who's already started to do a lot of the legwork with Tom to line up how that would work, and we feel very confident that without additional budget support, we'll be able to have both buildings wireless for this coming school year. We'd probably do that work over the summer. So I've taken that off the list, since we're figuring that's going to get done regardless of our budget discussion. So I just wanted to explain to you why those two items are off my list now, because they're already accounted for. So, yes.
Just
Yeah, sure.
before we do other questions, just a reminder, and for those of you who are new this year to the board, the March 8th budget workshop, starts at 9. It's a Saturday. We usually go till about noon, and so since some of these, we're getting these refined numbers and priorities today, just know that workshop is to really delve into the whole variety of issues, and all the administrators will be present. I think as well as Steve Boucher will be present, the athletic director. Does Steve sometimes come if people have questions for him?
We had Steve here, yeah.
So, that's a kind of give and take around this. So if you sort of feel like you need time to digest this, no rush this evening. But Lisa.
Joe, do you anticipate that at some point, either before or after the budget workshop, that there'll be a plan presented to the board for implementing the technology, either the purchases or the curriculum, like a timed plan, like a 5-year plan that coordinates with the self-audit? It was my understanding that was something that Steve was going to be doing. I don't know what your timeline is for presenting a plan like that.
Yes. I would say yes and no. Yes, I think we're getting close to having the first year or two of that 5-year plan. Again, Steve's only been here for a couple of months, so in one sense, I've been to say I've been pushing him is really isn't sending the right message, but I've been working with him and Tom to say, you know what, we know you've only been here since December, but we've got a budget that we've got to put out, and we have to make some near-term decisions, even though we might not be able to make it within the context of a 5-year plan. But there are some things we know we have to do now. For example, we have a bunch of hardware that's Windows XP that is not going to be supported after this spring. So we know we have to do something to replace those machines regardless of any 5-year plan. So our near-term plan is focusing on the things we know we have to do now, and part of that plan will likely involve more extensive use of laptop carts, and in order to do that, we'll require more robust wireless capability in our building. So those kind of near-term parts of that plan are starting to pull together now in an effort to be able to embed some of those things in this year's budget process. And I think once we get over that hurdle, Steve's also been working with Marvin and with the technology vertical team to have these discussions. We don't want to get too far out in front of them because we want them to have input and buy-in in the process. So some planning's been done thus far, and we'll be able to share that with the board probably before, certainly before the budget process is completed, just to let you know where we're going in the near term.
So would I be correct in thinking that a portion of these near-term projects are embedded in the proposed, in the draft budget now, and other elements of them, like the carts, are things that aren't in the budget, but you would be recommending that the board at least look at as things to do this year with money that we have available?
Yeah, I think that's an accurate assessment of where we're at. In fact, just again, because of the transition to a director of technology, we've not spent much of our technology budget from the current year, kind of holding off, waiting till we were able to hire and bring on the new director of technology. So we'll be purchasing from our current year's budget, as well as we've also put money in our general fund budget beyond what's on these lists. So, yeah, we have a fair amount of money earmarked for technology expenditures from current year budget, from 14-15 budget. Again, should it be submitted and approved? And anything that's on these sheets regarding technology is over and above that. In a perfect world, and we had more money to spend than we were anticipating now, there are some other things we could do. Likely, we may not be able to do them.
Diane?
Just two questions, the rest I can wait for that workshop. One, I don't think that you talked about, but under special education, the speech and hearing teacher, why that was taken off the list?
It was already in the budget.
It's in the regular budget, yeah.
Okay.
Excuse me, in an early iteration of this process, I've talked to the administrators to tell them that things to go on the list of potential programs and services are only things that we don't absolutely need. And early in the process, as we talked through that with Richard Zipp, we realized that wasn't a nice to have. That was a gotta have. So we switched that into our general fund budget. So that's already in the budget as you've received it thus far.
Right. And then for the workshop, for the sports, will Steve be able to speak to, or will we be able to have participation numbers and like how much the sports cost? And
yeah, Tom and Steve have been working on that. That's a very difficult document to put together, just because of the way the budget is built, and then it's spent over X number of different sports. So they're working on that, and they'll have that by the 8th, and I expect Steve will be here to address any issues or questions people might have with that. Yeah, and that will intersect with a few of these items on this list.
Anybody else? Diane?
I guess I have a couple of questions. Most of them I'll save for the workshop. One is just, you put in here in our board packages, the reports and the funds ending in January, and under operation and maintenance of the plant. I'm wondering, this year, being a particularly snowy year, is this where we're normally at? Is this how much?
What are you looking at, Diane, in your?
This document right here.
Yeah.
So one of my questions was for the removal of asbestos. We usually...
1 second, just so people find it. It's after 6.1.2.1.
Okay.
6.1.21.
Okay. Let me just go to that.
Well, we definitely spent a lot more money this year so far than we have last year in two aspects: snow removal and heat, fuel oil. Definitely much higher this year than we were last year at this time.
So when we go over the budget every year, this is one of the areas where we usually over budget in anticipation that we could have a year like this.
Yeah.
And then we, the last several years have been warm and we've had some extra money and we've tightened up that line. Last year we took some money out of that line.
Right.
And so I'm just wondering, what is the projection for this line by the end of the year? Or do you think we're going to run out of money, or are we going to end up with $50,000 left in this? And if you think we still have enough money in this going forward, could we approach the asbestos removal as in the years where we don't have snow 3 times a week every week for 3 months? We usually have $30,000 left in this line.
Right.
Could we plan to do it during those summers?
We certainly, that certainly is an option, yeah, and probably not an option this year, given the kind of winter we've had. But in other years, yeah, that may, if we decide not to go the route of, putting money in a repair reserve or whatever, we probably could do that. Typically, that's what Sheldon will use that money for, is doing various projects, and now that this asbestos issue is on our radar screen because of the emergency repair we had to do earlier this year, and knowing that it's a lot less expensive to do it before it's it's an emergency project, that may be and that's something that the facilities committee can certainly kick around with Sheldon that's a great strategy to do, and hopefully these won't be typical winters.
Yes, let's hope.
Yeah, let's hope it's right.
And also remember too, you can pull from anywhere in these budgets. With your approval, we can move money from other areas of the budget to address these concerns. The only thing we can't do is move it from areas into equipment, to buy more equipment. But we can definitely move things from, give you an example, we didn't have a December health insurance bill this year for DHIC. So there's money left there. If the board chooses, decides that, we can move money from that health insurance code over to Sheldon's code and start, the thing is, it would not get done this year, but if we went into contract with them this year, we could use the money from this year, carry it over to the next year, and complete it over the summertime.
And then I thought we were going to have some kind of, like last year we talked about fund balance projections.
I'm working on that.
Okay.
It's a lot more complicated with the extra accounts and trying to figure out how the ups and downs went over these past couple of years, how the how the tax cert went from year to year, the unemployment and that. But you'll definitely have that in about another week.
Okay.
So we'll have that before the March 8th
Yes.
workshop as well.
Yep. I'm working on doing another projection for the fund balance. That all ties into that.
Okay, so we can go over that at the meeting. All right. And then I had asked you to include 4.4.1,
Yep.
which you did, thank you, about the history of the budget and where it's come from. And on my own, in our budget books, we have enrollment history numbers.
Want me to add that to the list here?
Yeah.
So it's all represented on one sheet?
Yep.
Definitely.
So I just did it from 2006 to 2014, because that was in our historical data. And, I'd like to talk about the next meeting, but I think it's important information for the board to reflect on how to approach those trends, because they're going in opposite directions. So we can take that up next time.
So do you want to, I guess, do you want to take that up as an overall theme, or at March 8th in terms of the impact of the budget? Because if what you're, implying is that we shouldn't, add things to the budget because of declining enrollment, and I think we should also really interrogate, what it'll mean, like how much do you, what is each sort of cost of each student? If you lose a student, do you lose X number of dollars? No, you still need a classroom. You've talked about that. Like, until a classroom goes worth of students, your costs often are still the same. So I just want to make sure that if we're going to have a conversation about the relationship between enrollment and costs, we get a lot of information about what that means. There's not necessarily a direct link between, what's the marginal cost of an additional student, what's the cost of losing a student, and how do we understand that? So, because if we put it all on one sheet, you're requesting it, and that's fine, but I just want to make sure that we have time to digest what all that means, right? One more person on an airplane doesn't raise the cost of flying that airplane anymore. One more kid in the classroom doesn't. Losing 3 kids in the classroom may not. At the same time, when there are, various opinions about improving our technology infrastructure and adding more STEM programs and more extracurricular activities, and So I just think it's a big conversation. I just want to make sure it's not a conversation that's just like a direct link on a piece of paper between this is the money and this is the number of students.
Right, which is why I said to think about it before we actually have a
Yeah, no, I
conversation.
hear what you're saying. I just want to make sure, like, I was not aware that you were requesting that and wanted that on one piece of paper. And so if we're going to, I think we all want to know if we're going to have this conversation that's really linked to this, that everyone has an opportunity to digest that and go, well, what other information do I need? What other analysis of the economics of the school do I need to have an informed understanding of the impact of declining enrollment? If it's a matter of we just have to spend less money, if that's like an opinion that just with a broad stroke like that, then that's, a pretty simple one. But a bigger analysis of what that means, I think I might need more information, yeah.
I think that we should not be thinking that we're going to be making decisions directly about this coming year's budget based on enrollment trends going out over 5 or 10 years, because we're not ready to make those kinds of decisions yet. It's a conversation that we need to start having, but I don't think we are going to be in a position to make any long-term decisions during this budget cycle. So, we might want to uncouple those two concepts.
Well, I think that you're presenting it under the assumption that I'm suggesting that we don't grow the budget or that we cut programs. So I'll just jump ahead a little bit. In the last 8 years, enrollments decreased by 15%, which is quite a large number. And the budget has increased by 41%. So I think that we should be conscious of these numbers. I think that when we come upon an opportunity where we've saved money in our budgeting, like replacing the electric lights outside, we haven't cut a single program, we've saved money, and so we have 3 options of what to do with that. And we should be strategic in these circumstances of what to do with it. We can add a position, a something from our wish list, because it's not a one-time expense. That's something that we've had in our budget every year. And we should be thoughtful going through the years what we would want to add that would benefit our school district, and that would be a zero budget impact. We could also opt to cut the budget to save some tax money, or we could do nothing. The money would just go into our reserve funds. So I think because we're in such an interesting point in numbers, we shouldn't just let things happen without consciously thinking about those 3 options. Our fund balances are relatively full, so I think it's an opportunity to reposition money and grow the school district the way we want to, very strategically, but being very conscious of when we see an opportunity to save money, how do we want to grow programs using that money?
Always a good approach to budgeting, unquestionably, definitely. All right, any other questions on this right now? I mean, there's definitely a lot to think about and explore. And I guess I would also just say if there are other kinds of documents or information people want ahead of, at March 8th, then communicate that to Joe about what information you need.
Yeah, because we have our, just to get everybody thinking down the road, we have our March 8th budget workshop, then we have a regular meeting on March 11th, which is only a couple of days later, so not a lot's going to happen, if anything, between March 8th and March 11th, just in terms of the budget development process. Then March 25th is the next meeting. We're scheduled to adopt a budget at our first meeting in April. We could push that out until our second meeting in April and still be, within the timeline, but there are some advantages administratively to us if we're able to adopt the budget at whatever that first day in April is, first meeting in April is, 8th or whatever. Because there's a lot of work that needs to be done, filing notices and legal notices and also, putting a budget document together and having that ready to get that out, that the more time we have, I mean, it's easier for us, but there have been years when we pushed it out till that last week, and I mean, it's been okay. I'm not saying we couldn't do that. I'm just kind of reviewing with you what our schedule is to finalize and adopt the budget, and we've got one workshop, one board meeting that we could certainly discuss it, but won't have new information to put into the mix, and then one more board meeting before the board meeting that we're scheduled to adopt the budget. So it seemed like we started this a year and a half ago, but we're starting to get closer to crunch time now. So I just want to put that on everybody, plant that in everybody's head that we're getting there. Anyway. I won't beat that dead horse.
Just a quick question about March 8th. Are we going to get a new packet of draft budget before that so that we have a chance to look at it, or are we going to have those handed to us on March 8th?
I'm trying to think of what we would have to present that's new. I mean, the information that we were talking about in terms of, having that longitudinal data, that's something that we will have that we haven't given the board yet. The update on the athletic participation and whatnot, that's something we haven't provided yet. That will be a new document. I'm just trying to think what other new documents or information.
Reserve fund.
Yeah, the fund balance.
The fund balance, so so you should get all those things. Yeah, and we can always send them out to you electronically, and then have hard copy for you at your tables. That gives us the maximum amount of time to get this stuff produced, if that works for everybody. But
We'd actually probably get them a hard copy the night before, actually, because we're delivering a board packet that night anyway.
That's a good point. Yeah. Okay, that's a good point.
Okay.
But we could probably get it out before electronically to you a couple days before that.
Okay, thank you.
I just have a question about the budget workshop. Historically, has that been the opportunity or the occasion when members of the community who have something they want to share with us in terms of this decision-making process get involved? Is that?
We've had, let's see, my recollection is we've been flexible about that a little bit.
Yeah.
And it's really variable about whether we've had no members of the community and we've had, maybe 20.
Okay.
But
it's not a budget hearing.
Right.
Exactly. It's really a budget work session. It's a block of time for us to just talk about nothing else but the budget, not deal with a whole bunch of other stuff.
Yeah.
That said, this board has in the past always been very gracious in allowing people to ask questions or give their opinions, and it's happened, but it's not like this is the time to come to speak your mind. It's not a hearing. It's your work session, and to the extent that you feel comfortable giving up your work session time to allow people who might be here to speak their minds, that's the pleasure of the board, really. It's fine, and we've done it many times.
So, kind of depends on how it's going, how much time we need, and, but yeah, I think we have allowed sort of comments or clarifying questions of people there, and then they don't understand kind of something that we're talking about. Okay, any other questions on the budget? Great, okay. We'll move on now to board committee reports, and in our packets we have finance and audit, and Diane, you did the finance ones?
Okay, we've discussed the proposed veteran exemption, which we discussed at the last meeting, and different financial impacts, which again we discussed at the last meeting. And we discussed the budget, the recent deletions to draft budget, the proposed increase of 2.13% in the tax levy, to the budget, which would be a 2.53% in the tax levy. This did not include the technology additions, but I guess that's part of the money left over. Fund balance projections, we talked about. We briefly talked about enrollment projections. And the governor's proposed tax freeze is probably the most interesting thing we haven't talked about yet. And it seems like a lot of the details are still unclear. This year, we would be in compliance with the first step of that tax freeze in that we just need to stay under the tax cap. Going forward, it seems like the details call for all of the school tax levies in the county in aggregate to be cut by 1%.
That's our understanding, yeah.
Okay, more to come on that.
We had we had a very interesting conversation about that with the Assemblyman Barrett, and actually she was asking us, and her aide was asking us, kind of our understanding of what it meant, and I think we opened their eyes a little. Those of you who were there, I think they walked away saying, that's very interesting. So
I think they said your explanation was the best they.
Yeah, well, I wasn't going to say that, but thank you for saying it. Anyway, I'm sorry to interrupt.
And I was at a business official meeting right after that where we discussed it and says we wouldn't have a clue as to how we'd be able to do that. Don't have a clue how we could do that. That would basically say that everybody's budget's got to be cut by 5%.
The rollover budget would be cut by 5%, leading to a levy decrease of 1%.
Yeah. It would take so much to get a 1% decrease on the total levies across all the school districts. I mean, typically they're going up. Tax cap is around 2, but in the end, it averages out to around 3 with the exemptions and things of that nature and growth. To say, not only you're not going up 3%, but you're taking a 1% decrease, that means you got to find 4%. I mean, that means staff's being laid off, no increases in contracts. I mean, across everybody, not just one single district. All districts have to do it. I don't know, people already have contracts in place for that year. That could just throw us all off right there and say, well, we can't meet it because they have a contract that says they got to do this. And it's like, well, there's no way we're going to get to a negative 1% decrease. We're like, whoa, how is that ever going to happen?
Okay.
Anyway,
we're still going to discuss it. We're still going to see what we can do to try. But we're looking at going, whoa, we don't know how it's possible. But we'll do what we can to do it. But I don't know.
Okay.
It's going to be a challenge.
And is the governor offering any workshops of ideas or?
Not yet.
Well, it hasn't even been adopted. It's just his proposal at this point. All of our legislators would have to support that, and it's one of the reasons we're talking with them.
All right, and the cafeteria, we spent some time talking about the point-of-sale system that has been put in place. It's already been shown to be effective in its first week. And the business office has been working on reviewing some of the costs of the ingredients of meals, noticing that, there's a wide range of costs, which is expected, and some simple changes may be able to alleviate some of the higher prices. Some of the bidding contracts were reviewed, and more federal surplus food is being used this year, and then orders are being placed for next year. That was something that was brought up in the audits, having decreased over the last several years, so that's good. And We made a plan to follow up on reviewing the breakfast program, which has been reviewed the last couple of years. Participation seems to wax and wane, and the cost of labor per lunch still needs to be calculated. We're going to go over how much the point of sales has impacted sales. It had only been implemented the week before we met. And reconciling the number of meals prepared to what's sold, working on inventory control, working on ordering habits based on inventory and selling patterns, and starting to record some selling trends in a la carte items, which we're not quite programmed to do yet. Tom's going to look into the cost of non-styrofoam trays and just simple changes like using locked bags and reconciling the registers. Fiscal stress was put off to the next meeting.
Any questions for finance? Yeah.
One quick question. The breakfast program, you're suggesting that there's declining participation in it. What is the breakfast program? What's the mission behind it? And
a couple of years ago, we reviewed the numbers, and there was minimal participation at Chancellor, except for when they had the early morning math program. So we had thought at that time maybe we'd just keep it open during the early morning math program, since it was almost like no one was using it. And the middle school numbers were very low, but those kids could also go over and use the high school and buy coffee in the morning. So that was sort of a tentative idea we came up with. It looks like, briefly from what you showed us, maybe the numbers are a little higher this year.
Yeah, they're definitely up a little bit more, no doubt about it. It's up, but it's still a drain to the entire program, though. It's definitely, the high school is a break-even proposition, or even better than that, actually. That's making money.
Because you're keeping that open for 3 or 4 periods,
Yeah, it's
right?
open for 3 periods. Kids come in, they have their bacon, egg, and cheese, or whatever. There's some obstacles when it comes to the middle school and the elementary school. The biggest factor is students typically don't get there on the buses until just before school starts. That's a huge drawback for us right away.
why was it founded, though? I mean, if in fact in certain schools...
It's a national program.
It's a national program. So
Yeah. If you had a lot of walkers,
yeah.
like they would have in New York City or in an urban area, they could get there plenty of time to eat breakfast, and those are kids who maybe more often than not aren't getting a hot breakfast at home. And I think that was the idea. It doesn't seem to work for this community, and we could bring buses in 20 minutes early. Now we got a supervision issue with, so that's why really just.
But I think the idea is not the middle school kids could still go to the high school cafeteria. So it's not eliminating it, it just means that.
Consolidating.
Yeah.
Certainly, yeah.
Yeah, and that saves us the staffing in one of the cafeterias.
So any other questions for finance? We'll move on to audit. Laura, you give those minutes?
Yeah. So we had asked Tom to provide us with some historical internal audit cost data so that we could see what we were actually spending on a year-to-year basis. And it looks like we're not going to do a risk assessment every year, so we thought that it would be best if we cut that line by about half. We also talked about doing another small focused audit on the cafeteria in the spring, just to see how we're doing with the changes we've made so far, and Tom suggested that it might be really helpful to have the auditors help us set up the inventory and tracking systems so that we know that that's set up correctly from the get-go. We also looked at potentially adding a focused audit on the extra classroom for the summer, but we need to know how much that's going to cost us to see if we still have enough money in the budget to cover that. And then we'd like to do some focused audits rolling over the next couple of years, looking at payroll in the spring of 2015 and then accounts payable in the spring of 2016. And then we'll be ready to do another risk assessment presumably in 2016 or 17, depending on when the actuarial numbers are going to be assessed. We don't want to do it the same year as that. So we're waiting on the numbers for the extra classroom audit. I think Tom's going to get that
the internal auditor, and we'll see if we can swing that too.
Okay. Any questions for audit? Thank you. I think that's all the board committee reports we have this evening. We'll move on now to comments. Do we have any good news? I think we heard a lot of good news tonight, as we always do. And now, old business. Any items for old business?
Yeah, I'll bring up one, and that is the current school calendar. And first of all, I want to take full and complete responsibility for this winter's bad weather. It's all my fault. It's all my fault. Somebody had to do it. But anyway, in order to redeem myself, I had a conversation with our teachers union president today, and actually with our administrators the day before, and they would be willing to work their lost superintendent's conference day after school, outside of the school day. We've done it a couple of times in the past when we've run out of snow days, so they'll come in for 2-3 hour sessions outside of their work day, or 3 2-hour sessions. We'll schedule something that works in the various schools, and that the net result of that will be that, to date, and I hate to even say it, but I just have to say it, to date, we will only be taking back that May 23rd day, so that will be a day of instruction. We will also be sliding Grand Friends Day from the day before to that Friday. And if we have yet another snow day, then it'll be Monday, April 21st, and then we'll be working back into that full week. But having the teachers make up their superintendent's conference day time outside of the school day that'll save us another day. Right. Should be needed.
Great.
So I just
That's
wanted
good you could work that out.
Yeah.
Good. Also, under old business, does anyone want to do a little brief report on the meeting with Dee Dee Barrett, or let us know how that went? Thank you to those who went. I appreciate that. I think, right, there was a good turnout. There were 4 of you and Joe. Tom,
yeah. No, it was, I thought it was a good meeting. I think she probably learned more from us than maybe we learned from her. I mean, we did discuss, we discussed good issues, spent a lot of time talking about Common Core. She seemed very interested in hearing what we thought about it. Again, there were a couple issues that I think we were giving her some insights that maybe she didn't have before we walked in there. We were there an hour, and she gave us a full hour of FaceTime, so that was nice. Her aide, she had an aide with her for the whole period of time. So they were both there, and threw the ball to the little dog on our way in and out. And her office is pretty nicer than when we were in there last year, when she just moved in and hadn't unpacked her boxes.
Well, okay, yeah.
Oh, I was just going to ask, do we have a date for the meeting with Senator Gibson?
We do. It's in March 21st.
Like I said, it's later in March.
21st, yeah. And do we have anything with Cahill?
It's been a tough one to schedule, and not because of us. I don't know. Meg has talked with his secretary a bunch of times, and they just can't get a date. Period.
Okay.
I'll just leave it there, okay?
Do we have a time for Senator Gibson?
Yeah, I'll look it up and let you know while we're talking.
Well, thanks to those of you who did go down on our behalf, and in fact, that's what's supposed to happen, is, letting her know how legislation and other policy initiatives impact us. So it's good that she was able to listen.
We did raise the question of the alternative veterans tax exemption with her. We didn't have a particularly lengthy exchange about it. She sort of listened to the questions we raised. And we sort of left it at that. But one question I have is, obviously, we're not, in the timeline that was provided to us, going to be able to take any sort of action on this now. Where does it leave that sort of proposition? Can we revisit it at the later time?
Right. I think we talked about that at our last meeting. It would appear, I'm not sure, we'll have to find out at what point, probably the same time next year is the timeline for approving it. So at any time really between now and, I think we talked about maybe in the fall, taking it up and putting it on the agenda to allow opportunity for community input. And again, I would encourage that, if we're looking at that, also look at the other option that we're allowed to entertain, which is an income-based exemption for senior citizens. So I think all that information together. So the timeline really would be at the will of the board, whatever the timeline is for. Maybe Tom and Joe could find out for us at what time next year would we have to do it.
And would this be something on the agenda for the finance committee to sort of mull over?
That'd be a good idea.
That would make sense, yeah.
Just to get back to Lisa's question, the meeting with Senator Gibson is on Friday, March 14th at 2:30 in our district office.
Okay, any other items under old business? We have an opportunity for public comment. Would any member of the public present like to comment? No? Okay, can we move on to other? Are there any items under other? All right, great, then we move on to our action items. Does anyone have anything they want to pull from the consent agenda? Okay, then may I have a motion upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools to approve the consent items?
So moved.
By Mark. Second by Lisa. All those in favor? That's unanimous. That motion passes. May I have a motion upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools to certify Fern Locks as a qualified lead evaluator of classroom teachers effective February 18, 2014, having successfully completed the training requirements prescribed in 8 New York CRR 30-2.9B.
So moved.
By Mark. Seconded by Lisa. Any comments? All those in favor? That's unanimous. That motion passes. May I have a motion upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools to approve spring coaches advisors for the 2013-14 school year for softball varsity Justin Weisenthal at $3,757. Junior varsity Henry Frischknecht, $2,743. Modified Jennifer McCracken, $2,286. And modified assistant Scott Stuyverson, volunteer. For baseball varsity, William Carney, $3,757. Junior varsity to be announced, $2,743. Modified to be announced, $2,286. For tennis varsity, David Jutton, $2,846. Lacrosse varsity to be announced, $3,757. For track varsity distance hurdles, John Lombardo, $3,898. Varsity sprinting and jumping, Chris Sneed, $3,898. Varsity throwing and pole vault, Justin Randall, $3,898. Modified distance and throwing, Mark Berg, $2,395. And modified sprinting and jumping, Dave Airstock, $2,395.
So moved.
By Mark. Second by Lisa. Any questions or comments?
Go ahead. I do.
Does somebody? Oh.
Yeah, I had a comment and a question.
Okay.
It's nice to see a volunteer on here. Comment that for modified softball, modified definitely could use an extra hand. And Joe, my recollection usually is that all the sports usually that what they're paid is the same, but here they're quite different. Quite, I mean, it's not a large amount.
They're all out of the contract.
Is it just, there's no reason why, like,
No,
varsity
there's-
softball is paid different than varsity track? I just like remember in other sports that they're always the same.
Usually it's like baseball and softball will be the same.
Yeah.
Girls basketball, boys basketball, they're going to be the same.
Right.
Soccer's going to
But
be
different
the same.
sports tend to vary.
But the sports themselves do vary.
Yeah.
Okay, I just.
And they were set long
remember
ago, and they
seeing
just
that,
go up by negotiated
right.
contract.
Right.
so- Okay.
Any other questions?
I just had, something I needed to mention, and I would ask the board's indulgence to add a name to the varsity lacrosse. I thought I had put it in there, but obviously not, because it still says TBA. The lacrosse coach that's being recommended, his name is Jan Bonanza, Bonanza. I just want to get his name on there so we can get him working right away. We will, at our next meeting, have the baseball finished up. Right now, we're waiting to see whether actually we have enough interest to run both teams or not. We do have one coach lined up who coached for us last year, and he'll be recommended to coach for us again this year. We're just not sure what position, and we're looking for a third coach in the event that we have enough student numbers to justify that. I also believe we'll have another volunteer assistant coach for, I think, for varsity baseball on your next agenda, but came in too late to get it on the agenda today.
Okay. All right, great. So any other questions or comments? All those in favor of this motion as amended by Joe? That's unanimous. That motion passes.
Thank you very much.
May I have a motion upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools to approve the recommendation of David Airstock to conduct...
We just adopted the motion, but we never actually made it. You read it and then we said
okay. You moved it, Mark moved it, seconded by Lisa. All those in favor? That's unanimous. That motion passes. May I have a motion upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools to approve the recommendation of David Airstock to conduct selection, classification, fitness testing for the 2013-14 spring sports season as necessary?
So moved.
By Mark.
Second.
Second by Lisa. Any questions, comments? All those in favor? That's unanimous. That motion passes. May I have a motion upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools to accept the independent auditor's report for the 2012-13 school year?
So moved.
By Mark.
Second.
Second by Lisa. Any questions, comments? All those in favor? That's unanimous. That motion passes. May I have a motion upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools to approve an additional mentor for new teaching staff starting mid-year during the 2013-14 school year through their one-year anniversary date?
So moved.
By Mark.
Second.
Second by Lisa. Any questions or comments? All those in favor? That's unanimous. That motion passes. May I have a motion upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools to approve the appointment of Nicole Devens Saunders as a long-term substitute in the position of art teacher at Bulkley Middle School at the pleasure of the board effective January 30th, 2014 through TBA at the salary of step 1 MA plus 30, $59,620 prorated in accordance with the 2013-14 RTA salary schedule. This appointment is to fill the vacancy created by the leave of absence granted to Jennifer Familetti, art teacher at the Bulkley Middle School.
So moved.
By Mark.
Second.
Second by Lisa. Any questions or comments? All those in favor? That's unanimous. That motion passes. May I have a motion upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools to approve the 3-year probationary appointment of Anita Thompson to the position of teaching assistant assigned to Chancellor Livingston Elementary School effective February 26, 2014 in the teaching assistant tenure area at a salary of step 1 BA $25,558 in accordance with the RTA salary schedule for 2013-14.
So moved.
By Mark.
Second.
Second by Lisa. Any questions? All those in favor? That's unanimous. That motion passes. May I have a motion upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools to appoint 2013-14 CLS Before School Enrichment Program instructors?
So moved.
By Mark.
Second.
Second by Lisa. Any questions or comments? All those in favor? That's unanimous. That motion passes. May I have a motion upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools to accept the resignation of Margaret Tedisco, secretary to the superintendent, for the purpose of retirement as stated, effective July 1st, 2014.
So moved.
By Mark.
Second.
Seconded by Lisa. Questions? Comment?
We're going to miss her.
Tell me about it.
Joe, what do you need from us? Back off.
A big hanky.
Yes, well, I'm sure we will have another opportunity to show Meg our appreciation, but it certainly is with regret that we accept that Meg has done a fantastic job for this district. So.
She has.
And it was a beautiful resignation letter as well.
Truly.
All those in favor? That's unanimous. That motion passes. May I have a motion upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools to approve the list of additional emergency conditional substitute teachers and non-instructional staff for the 2013-14 school year?
So moved.
By Mark. Second. Second by Lisa. Any questions? All those in favor? That's unanimous. That motion passes. May I have a motion to move into executive session for the purpose of discussion of the employment history of a particular person?
So moved.
By Mark.
Second.
By Lisa. Second. All those in favor? That's unanimous. We're moving into executive session. Thank you.